Okay, so from my memory, I am going to try to show how William the Conqueror, um, of, the conquest fame, is related to Elizabeth II in one piece of paper sized, one A4 size. I do not know how this is going to work out, but I'm doing this from memory. So if I make a mistake, forgive me. So William the First had, okay, three relevant children. There's William the Second, called Rufus. There is Adela, not Queen, but we'll come back to her. There's Henry First. Henry the First has Matilda. She's the last member of the dynasty, because none of these people have sons, except for Adela. She has a son, which is a real problem. Because now these two are in conflict. But even though Stephen wins the crown, his sons die. So it's Matilda's son who ends up succeeding. Henry II, awesome king, marries Eleanor of Aquitaine, has Richard Lionheart, so Richard I. He also has John, not a successful John. John, thankfully, eventually dies. Has Henry III. And now we got the Plantagenets. They keep having sons. I'm gonna put the Plantagenets over here. So yeah, these are Plantagenets. And then they continue with Edward the First, Edward the Second, Edward the Third, and this is where things start to get crazy. We're starting to get into Wars of the Roses period. So Edward III has the Black Prince, whose name is Edward, but he doesn't become king. Instead, it's his grandson Richard the Second, who has a troublesome reign, comes king very young, etc. And then we have John of Gaunt, who founds the House of Lancaster, and Edmund, yeah, Edmund of Langley, who founds the House of York. So John has Henry, and he's the one who takes over from Richard. So he deposes Richard, locks him in a tower. He dies, and then he becomes Henry IV. He has Henry V, and he has Henry VI. Henry VI is kind of mad, so that's what kicks off all of the wars. John of Gaunt also has other kids who we'll get to. He's got John Beaufort, who's sort of a bastard who gets legitimized, and then there's another John Beaufort, and then there's Margaret Beaufort, or Maggie B, as we like to call her, but we'll come back to her. Edmund has the House of York. I think it is Richard of Coningsburgh. So that's a Richard. And then there's Richard Plantagenet, who's the Duke of York, who causes all the problems with Henry the Sixth. He ends up getting killed, and then he has sons. The ones that are important to us are Edward, who ends up deposing Henry the Sixth, and becomes Edward the Fourth. And he's got a brother, Richard. And I think you know where this is going when we say that Edward the Fifth and his brother are little boys who get locked up in the Tower of London by this guy who becomes Richard the Third. But have no fear, Richard III, who, he wasn't actually a bad king, but he gets kind of like painted as a tyrant later because Maggie B has had a son called Henry VII, who sort of takes over the mantle of the Lancastrian line, who he's sort of related to, ends up sort of marrying another daughter of Edward the Fourth. We won't paint her in, but basically ends up having Henry VIII, and he's won the Wars of the Roses. Henry VIII, of course, major problems having kids. Um, he has three kids who end up becoming monarchs, though. So the first who becomes a monarch is the youngest child and the only boy, Edward the sixth, and then after him comes Henry the First, and then Elizabeth the First. Obviously, none of them have kids. Henry the Eighth had a sister, Margaret, his older sister. He also had Mary, and that led to Jane, the Queen of 9 Days, but we won't really include her because she wasn't really the legitimate queen. And because I don't have much space left, as you can see, and we're only like halfway there, so Margaret has James I think it's James the Fifth of Scotland is the one that she has, yeah. And then he's got Mary, Queen of Scots, who sort of is involved in conspiracies to make her Queen of England over Elizabeth, but doesn't end up doing that. She ends up getting executed by Elizabeth, which her son James is all fine and dandy with because it ends up leading to him becoming James the First of England, or James the Sixth. We like to also call him James the Sixth because, give the Scots their due. So you can see we're only up to the 1600s, but we've got a long way to go. So we need to fill out some of this space to end up fitting this here. So what I'm going to do with James, I'm going to put the Stuart dynasty up here. He's got couple kids that are relevant. He's got a daughter called Elizabeth who will come back to her, who ends up marrying the King of Bohemia. That's modern Czech Republic. And she will come back into the story. But for now, we'll focus on Charles I. He's the one who gets his head chopped off in the English Civil War. And he has two sons who go into exile. The first ends up coming back and becoming king as Charles II. Charles II has loads of mistresses. His poor Portuguese wife, Catherine of Braganza, doesn't stand a chance. He's a fairly good husband to her, but doesn't end up having children with her. I say good husband, he didn't divorce her. Let's just say that. I'm looking at you, Henry. His brother's James II. Now, James II already has two daughters. He's got Mary and he's got Anne. He does get another wife who's Catholic, and by this point, James has also declared himself Catholic. This is a real problem, because he has a son with that wife, and Parliament's like, oh gosh, this means that, the Catholics are coming back. But they end up getting, thrown out. James gets deposed. Mary becomes Mary II, along with her husband, who's actually her cousin. So they've had a sister also called Mary, and she's had a son called William. And he's the leader of the Dutch Republic, who comes over to England, becomes William III. They are married. They are joint rulers. They don't have kids. Anne also tries really hard to have lots and lots of kids, doesn't. So she becomes queen after. She is also Queen Anne. And she's the one who unites England and Scotland officially, makes it the Kingdom of Great Britain. So going back to Elizabeth up here, Elizabeth of Bohemia, she has a daughter, because we don't want to go back to James II and his Catholic son and all of their people. They're called the Jacobites. They're bad because they're Catholic, basically. Elizabeth has, now I'm pretty sure, she has Sophia. I'm pretty sure Sophia is her daughter. I may be wrong. She may be her granddaughter, but I'm pretty sure Sophia of Hanover is her daughter. She's married to the Duke of Hanover, not the Duke of Hanover, the Elector of Hanover. They eventually become kings of Hanover. And so Sophia marries, him, and has George. George becomes George the First. I spelled George without an E, which is actually kind of applicable for the German. But they end up becoming more English. We got George II. He has a son, Frederick. They don't get on. None of the Georges get on, really. Frederick has a son called George III. Frederick doesn't actually become king. He dies before he can become king. So his son then becomes king. George III, we all know Mad King George. He has a number of kids. But the ones that are relevant to us are George IV, the Prince Regent, very fat, very, you know, loves life pretty much. And then he has another son called Edward, who's the Earl of Kent. Edward doesn't become king. Who does become king is William the Fourth. But neither William the Fourth nor George have had children. But luckily, Edward has a daughter, Victoria, who is our Queen Victoria, glorious Queen Victoria. Now, I'm really running out of space here, God. So Victoria marries Prince Albert, as we all know. Luckily, the family tree gets really simple from here. We've got Edward the Seventh. And then he has a child, Edward. No, not Edward. George. Another George. George V, who's our World War One king. Then he's got two sons, Edward VIII, of abdication fame, and then George VI, of father of Elizabeth I fame. So, I did it. I managed to fit it all in to an A4 bit. I hope you enjoyed that.